Hey there, and welcome to Heroes of Marketing Cloud, the series where I interview fellow marketing cloud experts. I'm Anthony, I'm the co-founder and CEO of vSelect, and today I'll be interviewing Jackie Mennie. Jackie is a Salesforce Marketing Champion. She's had a great career throughout financial services and other industries, and she's currently working at Media.Monks. Welcome. So, hey, Jackie, welcome to Heroes of Marketing Cloud.
Hey, Anthony, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure. I can't say how excited I am. And you've been doing so many interesting things across your career. And I thought that might be a good point to start for our audience today. So if you wouldn't mind, could you give us like a high level overview of your career up to this point? And then today you're at Media.Monks. What does your day to day actually look like?
Sure. So I might be dating myself here, but in 2010, I completed my master's degree at the University of Florida, go Gators, in international business. And the job market was pretty bad at the time. And my first salaried job was actually working for a financial advisor at Northwestern Mutual. So that was kind of my start in the financial services industry by accident, I would say. And I got to do a wide range of stuff there, like insurance underwriting and client servicing, marketing, and eventually I became certified to handle investments as well. And I also was part of a pilot team for a new CRM at Northwestern Mutual, which somehow launched me into my first Salesforce job, which was in 2014. And I switched over to healthcare. And I spent a year working for a subsidiary of United Health Group, building out Salesforce Core, as some may call it. And after about a year, I was recruited back to the financial services industry, which was around 2015, to work on another Salesforce Core implementation at US Bank, which is headquartered here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I was there for about 5 years. And at some point, I took over the Marketing Cloud email program for the wealth management group, which was my first Marketing Cloud role. And then in 2019, I switched over to the agency side, or the Salesforce partner side of the ecosystem. And I was working as a senior marketing automation consultant on Marketing Cloud and Pardot implementations. And in March of this year, I took the next step in my career as a Salesforce Marketing Cloud architect at Media.Monks, which is
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. It's been fantastic. I really, really love my team, and Media.Monks has just been a really cool company to be a part of. I'm still pinching myself that they let me in. Somehow I convinced them to hire me, but it's been great. And I think you asked, what does a day-to-day look like for me? So most mornings I am joining, whatever stand-up calls for, Scrum check-ins for whatever clients I'm assigned to at the time. And then my day pretty much varies after that. So sometimes I'm heads down working on, lately it's been a lot of data architecture and how we're going to line up implementations for clients. So working with my other delivery team members. I just got my Data Cloud accreditation. So I spend a lot of time researching new Salesforce products and getting up to speed on those, and then enabling the rest of our team members on how to use those. And then a little bit of my day, I get to do Marketing Cloud champions work like this.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and obviously that's also one of the ways how we got to meet each other, thanks to the Salesforce Marketing Champions program, which is fantastic. Go Gilda. But you've done some very interesting transitions in your career, from financial advisor all the way to an architect, which is quite a technical role. I'd be very curious if you would have any tips or, maybe even words of caution, what people can expect if they want to transition from like an industry to more of a system integrator job, whether it's a consulting job or like an agency job. Do you have any insights there for us?
It's not for everyone. So I think that working for, a company like a bank or a healthcare company and doing Salesforce, that has a lot of pros, but also has some drawbacks there. And then on the consulting side, the same thing. It's something different every single day. The pace is extreme on some days, but then the pace can just come to a screeching halt, and you might have a week where you get to just focus on studying and working on certs. So that's been a really cool thing for me. I don't mind the ebbs and the flows of the schedule. It's always worked out in my favor, but I think that some folks may not enjoy that. So that would be my word of caution is, if you're someone who is considering a move to like the partner side, I would talk to some people who have maybe experienced both sides of, what it means to work for systems integrator, what it means to work, what I would call like the brand side. And, just ask them about, hey, what do you like about each one? Why did you switch? And do you ever want to switch back?
Right. But you like the variety.
I do. I really like being a consultant. I like getting to work on different accounts. And I think it's given me a lot of opportunities in my career that I didn't necessarily see as options in my previous roles.
That's so cool. So of all those Marketing Cloud projects you've done so far, which one stood out? Which one did you think was very interesting?
Well, that's not fair. I think they're all interesting, but there's one that might not sound very interesting to folks because it wasn't necessarily like super technical, but I worked with a tile company and they had set up some partnerships with a couple of Instagram and TikTok influencers. And I mean, big ones, like big, like Grammy winning people that would make really cool videos. And we came in, as part of their swipe up campaign. So we set up Cloud Page, and we also set up Facebook lead capture integration with Marketing Cloud. And then we were able to use Journey Builder to kick off an email series. And we also used that to actually push the leads into Sales Cloud, which I'm not going to get into. It's not normally maybe something you would do, but we had a limitation with the Salesforce team was kind of at capacity and didn't have bandwidth to create a different process. So for me, it was just really exciting to see all of those, fundamental capabilities of Marketing Cloud being used, I think, in their truest form, and getting to see just that whole circular process from end to end. I mean, watching the leads get created and watching them get worked and go into different stages of the journey, that was really fun. Plus, TikTok is fun.
Was there some kind of TikTok integration there, or was it more just on the brand side that it just happened to do lead gen via TikTok as well?
It wasn't really on my team's side. That was handled pretty much prior to us getting involved. We were just there to create the landing pages and create any of the data capturing that needed to be done.
Got it. Yeah, because I recall at Salesforce Connections, which is just behind us, there was even this TikTok booth. It was kind of interesting, but I think with the audience that we have today here, we can definitely go into some technicalities at any point if you like. Because for instance, you alluded to saving leads in Sales Cloud. And I would be kind of curious to hear actually like what was the idea behind that, and then link to that maybe a bit of the broader question, because you've had exposure to Marketing Cloud but also to Core. Usually, I find that gives people a wider view and they're more informed when it comes to taking architectural decisions. So yeah, if you have some insight there, whether it's the specific setup at this customer where the leads went into Core in Sales Cloud, or in general, some things you've learned working cross-cloud, I suppose.
So a couple things, when we were capturing the emails directly in Salesforce Marketing Cloud, and then sending a triggered email because it was a request for a coupon, and then we used Journey Builder to actually force the lead to get created in Sales Cloud. I would say that that's not always the best way to do it, for two reasons. Because number one, when you send that triggered email out, you don't have the Salesforce Core subscriber key which I like to keep the system pretty clean. So we effectively were creating, intentional duplicates, which you have to create a backend process to get that all cleaned up at the end of the day. So that was something that we recognized in advance, and we were willing to take that on because we also were aware of the volume of leads, which is the second thing. If you're going to use Journey Builder to push a bunch of data into Sales Cloud, that can really blow up some of your API limits. So it's not always a great solution because that can hurt you on the Sales Cloud side. But again, because we were very comfortable with the volume, we knew what it was going to be, we knew what our limits were, we felt that it was either this and then clean up the dupes on the back end, or not get to use the technology at all, because there was just no option at that moment on the Sales Cloud side. There just wasn't any bandwidth. So we wanted to make sure that the marketing team could still hit their goals.
Yeah, it's very interesting what you say, because I think there are some default best practices, but ultimately architectural decisions are driven by certain business needs. It sounds like in this case, it was more important to get the leads into Marketing Cloud right away, because then you can do triggered sends, and that allows you to do immediate responses. And then maybe for the audience, for those who don't know, normally you would probably sync the leads to Sales Cloud and sync them over through Marketing Cloud Connect, but that takes about 7 to 8 minutes. Was that the primary driver for, am I guessing right, essentially?
In our situation, it was going to be even longer of a lag. And since the use case was a coupon that people were requesting, we felt that it was absolutely necessary that they get that coupon instantly, within 2 minutes or less. Because I think that's what we all expect. When we request something online, we expect instant responses.
Yeah, everyone wants instant gratification these days, don't they? So no, absolutely. An autoresponder where you would have to wait for half an hour, that just feels like a broken process. I didn't realize, by the way, that Journey Builder contact creations, I guess they're called, because I know there's a component for that. I didn't know that counts towards your API limits. I know we just created at DSelect, we just created a component for Engage, which it sends an API call out of Marketing Cloud, but it actually doesn't count toward the limit. So with this, does it count towards the Marketing Cloud API limits when you do contact updates or contact creations in Journey Builder?
Don't quote me on that, because this was years and years ago, and that stuff is all the time. So I know at the time it was something that we needed to take into account.
Got it.
Whether what I know is the outcome is that we felt that the volume that was coming in was not going to affect anything. So
yeah,
I'd have to look that up though, about what the answer is, 2023, because we have a release, around the corner. I can never keep up.
Yeah, no, and it has actually changed. Now that you mention it, that kind of rings a bell. I know, for the audience, again, Marketing Cloud wasn't Salesforce from the get-go. It used to be something else called Exact Target. And so it took a while for Salesforce to more and more integrate it, which is, I would say, even still an ongoing process today. But you are absolutely right. API calls actually, even going to Salesforce, counted towards your limits initially. So that might have driven the decision. Fascinating how that kind of stuff has changed. Another thing that, you've been an interesting content creator, to put it one way, on the web. And a little birdie at Connections told me that one of your most successful blogs is one about Marketing Cloud permission. So can you, can you educate us a bit on what should people know about Marketing Cloud permissions, and also where can they find the blog?
Yeah. Okay. So the blog is on a prior company that I worked for named Horizontal Digital. It's on their website, and I believe it's called Marketing Cloud Permissions Part 1. So the first thing I can tell you about it is I still get emails from people asking when Part 2 is coming out and why it hasn't come out yet. And if you must know, so this was like, I think, right, COVID had started, and then my workload got pretty much at over capacity, I think, up until the point in late 2021 when I had a baby. Then I went on maternity leave, and life happened. So that's why part 2 did not come out in a timely fashion. Part 2 still is very much on my mind because I have a lot more thoughts on, custom permissions and how to layer just smaller permission features instead of trying to recreate an entire massive, and what I mean by permissions really is roles in Marketing Cloud. But where can they find it? So I told you it was on Horizontal's website.
Yeah, and are there some tips and tricks someone who's newer to Marketing Cloud should keep in mind? So what's the essence of the article?
Yeah. So, well, the hardest thing for me was because I came from a Salesforce background, I was used to Salesforce Sales Cloud permission sets. Right. And you could combine every permission set in Sales Cloud in the world, and all they will ever do is possibly add on to the amount of permissions that user has. And Marketing Cloud, it took me a minute to figure out that this was not how the roles worked in Marketing Cloud. And the blog helps people differentiate between, which of these roles you really have to keep an eye out for, because a lot of them have these small areas where they're denying permissions for something. And when a denied permission is compiled or combined with an allow permission, Marketing Cloud is kind of the opposite of Sales Cloud. Marketing Cloud is going to go with the most restrictive permission. And I think, so many people that I have trained on Marketing Cloud, they've gone, oh, can you set me up as a user? And I'm like, yep, I'm going to give you the admin and the Marketing Cloud admin roles, which are pretty standard for most people I work with. A lot of my clients, it gives them heartburn to be handing out permissions with the label of administrator and Marketing Cloud administrator. And unfortunately, that's just one of the easiest, fastest options that Marketing Cloud offers to give people the access they need. But I've had so many colleagues go and they're like, oh, you forgot to add all of these on my account. And they went in, they checked the boxes, and then they call me and they say, well, I'm locked out now. I can't even get into this. And I was like, okay, it's because you should not have added those other roles to your profile. They actually took away access that the administrator role had. So my advice to folks that are getting started with that is less is a lot more when it comes to those roles. And my second piece of advice was that you can edit some of these roles in Marketing Cloud. Some of them you cannot. About half of them you can. I'm talking about the default ones that come as soon as you sign up for Marketing Cloud. Don't go crazy messing around with those. The reason I say that is because every time Marketing Cloud has a release or new features, Marketing Cloud will automatically make updates where they need to make sure that their features are enabled. So trying to clone an existing role in Marketing Cloud, I'm going to say that's just off the bat, not maybe my favorite plan, because it's not protected for future releases. And then the second thing is I made some comments in that blog about where I thought would be a good opportunity to customize a little tiny bit on one of the out of the box roles. But again, I wouldn't go bananas trying to turn those into something that they're not meant to be.
Yeah, for sure. I wish I had the article at hand when I started playing around with Marketing Cloud, because I ran into exactly the same kind of issues. And I think it's a good, piece of advice that was there. So make sure to put the blog in the, description of this video. So you discussed a little bit about Marketing Cloud itself, but obviously a big part of your experience is centered around financial services. Are there still some things that unique considerations that people have to take into account when collecting subscriber data in that industry?
I think, the industry as a whole is one of the most regulated, most strict industries, right up there with healthcare. And sometimes I would say it's even stricter than healthcare for good reason. So, considerations that I always think about, this is not necessarily like a unique consideration, but less is more when you're capturing the subscriber data. I think marketers especially, like, we want all the data at our fingertips because we might use it at some point. But we also have to consider, being reasonable and how much can we effectively manage? Because the more data we collect is the more data that we have to keep track of. And I think that you should go into it knowing, what are your overall goals with the subscriber data that you're capturing. You should know when you're setting this up ahead of time, what are we trying to do here? What's our goal? And how do we measure this? And those kind of questions will get you the right answers that will suggest which data you really do need and what's more important, because grabbing nothing is not a great plan, and grabbing everything is also not my favorite.
Yeah, and I think I've actually even written about that myself, how a lot of people treat Marketing Cloud sort of as their data warehouse, and they just ditch everything in it. And sometimes because they have some technical limitations with the rest of their IT landscape, but usually it's better to have a very well-conceived subset of your data to bring into Marketing Cloud. But I think here you're even taking a step back further and thinking even about the collection of data. Have you ever encountered like customers collecting certain bits of data that were just never useful, or that like never really got used, maybe unengaged subscribers, those sort of things?
I've definitely seen folks. I think most people do, if we're being honest. We think we're going to need it, and it turns out that we've got a placeholder for it, but we don't really have a great plan of how it gets populated. So I've seen that one, I would say, the most, of where we create all these fields in a data extension, or we create all these possibilities of where this data could be captured. But at the end of the day, it's not being maintained on a regular basis, and it's not being refreshed. So even if we did want to use the data, I start to lose faith in how trustworthy it is, because it could be pretty old and it's probably not complete.
For sure. And when you say maintain, do you have some examples of like what kind of maintenance that do you have in mind? Are there certain processes, automations you would set up for that?
Well, I think, the example that I'm thinking about is, we had this one form and this one campaign where we collected, 8 different data points and fields. And so this one we've never collected before. So we went in, we set it up as an attribute, and we put it in our whole contact model. And we never went out and like regularly collected that information for people in other campaigns, or we never tried to fill that in after the fact. We just had this one tiny campaign's worth of data, with the data point, and that was it, right? And it never got touched since then.
Right, it was just sitting there. Yeah.
It was sitting there, and we set up we set up everything for it, like in the contact model. And then I'm thinking, we went through all of that just for this one data point that we never used again. And so when I think about, is there an automation or a best practice, it's not necessarily, refreshing it, but it's more so when we created that campaign, thinking, outside of the campaign to say, is this the data point that we're going to use in the future? Is it going to be ongoing? Is this something we want to go back and collect from subscribers we already have on file? And having answers to those kind of questions, I think, would really affect the architecture and the decision process of how we went and set it up for that particular campaign. Because maybe we wouldn't have gone through all of that if we weren't going to use that data point on a large scale.
Uh-huh. But in that, for that campaign specifically, and I don't know if you can share what data point it was, but for that campaign specifically, you needed the data point, but not for any other campaign ever after. Am I understanding that correctly?
Well, if you asked me, I didn't think we needed it at all, but that was just my personal opinion.
All right. Yeah, because I can see that maybe, maybe for some campaigns, for instance, I remember a campaign in automotive where we would award some prize, right? And I think it was a survey and there was a prize associated with it. So at the end of the campaign, people could indicate what kind of prize they would prefer. And that data itself was interesting to us because those prizes were actually accessories So that also gave a little bit of market feedback on those accessories in question. So I would maybe categorize it as temporal data or ephemeral data, if you prefer that phrase. But it would absolutely not make sense to add that to your, actual contact model or your actual data model. But that's also the beauty of Marketing Cloud, that you can create these temporal data extensions and have that flexibility at a campaign level, which is much harder to do and even in Salesforce Core, I would say.
Yeah, I agree.
Nice. Let's talk about another piece of the Salesforce family that's getting pushed very heavily these days, and it was all around at Connections again. Salesforce Data Cloud, formerly known as Salesforce CDP. What do you think about Data Cloud in general, and then also how it pertains specifically to those industries that you're so experienced in?
I think it was, built for these kind of industries, especially financial services. So, in my experience, I worked at an institution that did banking as well as investments. And I think what a lot of people don't realize or understand if they haven't worked in the industry is that these services like investments, that's governed by a completely different body of laws, and they have their own legal ramifications and requirements versus banking. And so a lot of times there's so many different systems where all of these actions are being performed, whether it's for a loan or a mortgage or a credit card, checking account, and then you've got a totally other system for a retirement savings account or a college savings account that you're setting up. These happen in so many different places, and these teams are going in so many systems throughout the day. Mm-hmm. I have seen it to where, the insurance application, somebody had like a number at the end of, Jackie Mennie the third. And I have seen this entered so many different ways, when it was the insurance application, and then it was the system where the retirement account was held, and then it was the CRM. And, these all would merge eventually, and you'd end up in the CRM with like 7 versions of this person. And it drove me insane. This was back at my first financial services job, because someone took, a paper application, and it all mattered how they hand keyed in the fourth. And so Data Cloud to me is the answer to that big problem I had. We have to work in so many different tools, especially in financial services. Like I said, just the way that this is obviously just the behaviors, what you're doing, transactionally on a day-to-day basis, we have to do those in different systems, as well as the fact that different laws require different things for each of these product lines. And because of that, we're merging data from so many places. None of these systems, they don't set up just basic profile information. They don't even have the same field set up as we do in other systems. So when you're trying to push that all into one place, the answer, I do think, is Data Cloud, and the ability to harmonize these into a unified profile is going to really help people relax and help them, get the right data so that they can send the right campaigns.
Yeah, and I just realized that maybe not everyone who's listening to this already knows what Data Cloud is. So would you mind just in a few sentences describe how do you see Data Cloud? And then given the challenges that you described, with especially in financial services having so many different applications for different lines of business, what's the use case there for Data Cloud? How does it fit into that puzzle?
Oh gosh, so you're going to ask me, wow, I feel like the Salesforce gods really would want to, this is putting me to the test, like to explain Data Cloud. But ultimately, the way I'll translate it in very, very simple terms is that we have the opportunity to go to a variety of data sources, and then we can ingest them into a Salesforce core account. You can do that right in your own Salesforce core account. You can have a separate core account that just is for Data Cloud behaviors. Either way, you can ingest them all in one place, and then you can look at the data that you're getting, and you can start mapping it to each different place and sort of find a connection between them. And the big caveat there is Data Cloud does not deduplicate your bad data. I think that was like the biggest aha moment for me when I learned if you think that you're going to get Data Cloud and it's going to just solve all of your duplicate data in your source systems, that's not what's going on there. What Data Cloud does is it gives you an interface where you can collect all your different data sources and you can tie them together and say how they each relate to each other. And you can create this unified profile. It's not going to go right back to your sources. It's not going to send the unified profile back there and clear out what's in there. That all stays. But the unified profile will allow you to identify that, okay, this from here and this from here, this is all the same person. And the preferred email address for this person is this one. And then kind of collect all these attributes together. And there's a couple different things you can do with that. You can use the segmentation feature within the tool. You can use some of the insights there. You can create a lot of very fancy formulas and insights, really to your heart's desire, to create segments for your marketing campaigns. One of the use cases that I see, and that I think is pretty relevant to the financial services, is using that to leverage consent management object in Sales Cloud. Because I think a big thing that Data Cloud can allow us to do is, once we're creating that unified profile, relating that back to the consent management and the right records. I think that's a huge one because privacy is so important, and honoring our subscribers' preferences, is, if we can't do that, then I would say I don't know what else we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the Salesforce gods will be very pleased with the explanation. Thank you for humoring me. But I think it helps for people who are listening to have that step back as well, just what it means, because it's very easy to get lost in the world of Salesforce and all the abbreviations and jargon that we've gotten accustomed to over many years in our experience, of course. What you said, I think, about the consent is something that's easily overlooked. I think when it comes to Data Cloud, most of the conversation is usually focused on unification of the data, having it in one place. When you think about the policies, while you were explaining that, another question came up. I wonder if you've seen it. Maybe the answer is no, but sometimes I've seen amongst financial services, amongst actually healthcare, or the life sciences industry as a whole as well, that these organizations have certain sender policies. And what I mean with that is that they also have a legal or a compliance limitation to how many email sends they can do in a given period, where it's not going to be like retail that it's within a week's time frame, but maybe measured in months. Is that something that resonates or that sounds familiar?
It's been some years since I've had to. So I've sat and taken my Series 7, which is effectively, well, it's like a 7-hour exam. It's awful, but essentially a stockbroker's license, and it's what allows you to work with investments. And in terms of the legality of what you can send to people, I'm not aware of a specific time limitation, how many you can send over a given period of time. I think that is mostly handled, company or firm by firm. And it really has to go back to like, what did the customer agree to when they gave their information to that firm? What are their expectations? And then, what options are they provided with if they want to change any of those communication preferences? That seems to vary just based on each firm, but I'm not aware of like an overarching law that says certain firms can only send a certain amount of emails.
Yeah, and maybe it's more of an internal compliance thing here that I'm pointing at, or that we've encountered. But I can imagine, though, that especially the company that you were describing earlier in financial services, where you have these different lines of businesses that operate fully differently, they have different law applied to them, that it's also very hard to track which marketing team has already sent what to which customers. So that might be a central part of the problem too, I suppose.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is something that has obviously perked our interest as well when we think about things like frequency sending through, and as you know, our platform allows us to let people sort of set frequencies on how often they want to send, but also they can actually do this across business units, and maybe at some point even across marketing cloud orgs, because exactly the problem you described. What did you do, or was that something you were exposed to, like when marketers were sending from different lines of business, or even different, whether it's different marketing cloud BUs or different marketing cloud orgs? Was it a problem you ever had to face?
I would say it's something I've been exposed to. So when I worked at or I've worked with clients too at other institutions where they have different lines of business, but they're sharing a marketing cloud org. It's often different marketing teams that are in charge of each group. And, depending on the policies and, okay, does this marketing campaign get priority over this one? So there was always like an internal weekly meeting that I was part of where we would all discuss our audiences and what campaigns needed to go out. That was just the best way. We had a master schedule, and if if it got to a point where somebody had to make a decision, it wasn't necessarily me. I would just stand for my business line and say what our needs were, and then let the higher ups duke it out.
Yeah, that's going to be my follow-up question. How does the prioritization happen? Is it yeah, I don't know how that process works. If you could walk us through it, I think it's interesting.
I'm sure it varies, across different firms, but I would say generally speaking, like whose campaign can has the possibility to generate the most revenue, and what's the margin on that. And I think whoever has the best answer to that question is probably going to win the argument.
So it sounds like you almost have to make a mini internal business case to get your campaign prioritized in that circumstance.
I've had to do that more than once.
Yeah, super interesting. Okay, I want to shift gears back a little bit to the community itself. Thanks for sharing those insights about financial services and what's happening on the Salesforce side, specifically for the Marketing Cloud community. Maybe a bit of a tongue-in-cheek question, but what do you see as the biggest challenge that nobody's talking about?
As far as like what's the biggest challenge, gosh, I don't know the answer to that, but a challenge that's on my mind right now that nobody talks about is distributed marketing. This is a product that I see a lot, surprisingly. And the most I see it is with financial services clients that are using it. And the trouble is that there's not a lot out there in terms of documentation, in terms of demonstrations or example use cases. I think what's out there on Trailhead is a great place to start, but I've had so many colleagues even who have wanted to shadow my distributed marketing implementations because they've said, I've gone through the Trailheads. I still don't really understand what that product does and what it like. What
and again, can you quickly define for us what is distributed marketing and specifically in Salesforce,
Sure.
what does it look like?
Sure. So, and I'll give you a translation because I've heard from folks that the example on Trailhead is not the easiest to follow, but the distributed marketing feature, it lives in Sales Cloud. And so it's a product that you pay extra for through your Marketing Cloud account. So you need to have Marketing Cloud and you need to have some version of Salesforce core, whether it's Financial Services Cloud, Sales Cloud, Service Cloud. You need to have both. They need to be connected. And what it does is allows your marketing team to create emails that live in Marketing Cloud. You create them practically the same way and you put them in a journey, but then you spend the bulk of your time actually in Sales Cloud. Once that journey is activated, you set it up in the distributed marketing app, and it allows Salesforce users to go add their leads, their contacts in Salesforce. So they're staying in the tool that they know and they love, and they're able to build campaigns And either you could send them either what's called a quick send email, which is kind of like it sounds like you have your list and then you can preview the email that the Marketing Cloud team built. You can look at that right in Sales Cloud and you can say, send it to my list. And in some cases, you can even customize different pieces of it. And then you can also send, full out journeys that the marketing team has created. And the reason this is cool, especially in financial services, is because like in the wealth management space, you'll have bankers and advisors who have their own book of business. They'll want to reach out to clients and they'll want to reach out to leads. But we don't want them doing that in Outlook necessarily, because like I said before, there are so many compliance laws about what you can and cannot say that the advisors, they need to be using like pre-approved content. And the best way to do that is for the marketing team to go through their normal compliance process of getting the content approved. They create the materials and then they make it available in Salesforce to send. And this way, nobody has to worry that something was misstated or, potential legal loopholes or anything like that. And then because it's all in Salesforce and it's not one person's Outlook inbox, this allows us to use the Marketing Cloud Preference Center that the team is already using and maintaining preferences that way. Because when people spin off and try to send marketing emails through their own Outlook inbox, they don't have the ability to check the person's preferences and opt-out settings that are stored in Marketing Cloud, but those are still marketing emails. So that's another great reason that distributed marketing really works for firms that are set up like that.
Yeah, super interesting. It's almost like a way for the organization to better control what email gets sent out by individual representatives, right? Mm-hmm. And I think I know exactly what you mean, because I'm thinking back about a recent example where our bank, the banker of our bank sent me an email, but it was like clearly pre-formatted and it was to send certain documents. So I guess that's because they can only share that if it's that tracked way versus Outlook. I'm assuming they use Outlook. And to what extent is it really about defining there's a part of it which has to do with choosing whom you can send to, as you mentioned, and there are even some opt-ins and preferences come into play, but there's also a content piece. Is the idea behind the distributed marketing that is going to be used, for instance, by sales reps, and this is the layout, you can't change it at all? Or are there even use cases where maybe like a local marketing team can still change a banner or that sort of thing?
Yeah, good question. So a lot of what you'll see in the Salesforce training materials about distributed marketing really focuses heavily on that ability to customize, so what the marketer does in Marketing Cloud is they'll create a template, and they might have, a bunch of content variations that they plug in and make available. And then the end user, in the distributed marketing user, can use Salesforce to mix and match different content options. That's absolutely, probably what you'll hear the most from Salesforce is how flexible this product is and these features. And yeah, that's when you would see, like in a franchise situation where you've got a local marketing team that doesn't, a local marketing team doesn't have an army of this person's the email expert and this person's a social media expert. A lot of times it's like one person who is handling all of these things. And you'll hear the concerns about if it's like a franchise and, how do we make sure that the voice and the brand are being protected when we can't train all the franchisees? So we can make that content available through distributed marketing and Marketing Cloud. And those are great scenarios of where the flexibility is phenomenal. In financial services, I would say that I don't see a lot of financial services clients utilizing the flexibility. They're using some of the other great features of distributed marketing, less so the flexibility.
What do you think is the reason for that?
Compliance. So compliance almost always has to pre-approve any emails that are sent out. And so allowing like big open text boxes and the ability to just edit whatever you want, that's going to give compliance like a major heartburn. And that's kind of a big no-no in that space. So those are clients where I don't see utilizing like a lot of the open text blocks and major variety options. Like I said, that's just because that's not really what we need out of the tool in that industry.
Super interesting. This may be a good leeway into something else I wanted to explore with you, which is the relationship between the more creative marketers and their marketing automation team, technical marketing team, maybe even IT in some organizations. And as I'm saying that, it comes to mind that you have the same dichotomy sometimes between the brand you're working for and you might have as being on the agency side now. So if you reflect on that, whether it was why you were still working for a brand or now at an agency, what are some best practices that you found for that collaboration?
Ooh, some best practices that I've seen really, I think they start with just a mutual ground of respect and acknowledgement that each person has a role in this process and that it's critical. So I think by sharing, what your goals are up front and sharing what and learning what the other team's goals and maybe their priorities, their obstacles, by getting an understanding of that, I think that allows us to just be more empathetic. And I think that having more empathy, it builds a lot more trust within the group, because when we're collaborating with all these teams, we have to trust each other. So if the marketing team has these goals and we're waiting on IT to set something up for us, or we can't get the data we need, it can just build up like a lot of frustration. So I think, understanding and being transparent about what it is that is the holdup and, what are everyone's priorities, and trying to be really understanding of those helps us work together better as a group. And then also learning how to break our goals apart sometimes and be flexible. I think in consulting, this is like one of the biggest things that at first I'm like, but that's the wrong way to do it. Why would we set it up that way? Well, that's the only way we can make progress. And so sometimes we have to look at our goal and say, okay, if we can't get the dream state, which is I want my transactional, I've got a system where payments are being made, and I want that information, and I want that to go into Salesforce, and I want it to create a whole subscriber record, and I want all that stored, and then I want it pushed into Marketing Cloud so that I can send their receipt. And I want that all to happen within like 90 seconds. It could, but sometimes the team that's handling that transactional system where the payments are being held, sometimes to get that team to put the data that we want in Salesforce, that might not be an immediate option for us. And so we have to say, do you want to scrap the whole project? Or maybe we talk about a temporary approach until we can get the data to flow the way we want it. So I do a lot of that day to day, in trying to get creative about problem solving and thinking about things in phases, not necessarily in just like what's the perfect way to solve this problem, and it's either that or nothing.
It can be an interesting friction between those two kind of teams. Luckily, I think more and more technical marketers are really of the mind and heart that they want to enable their colleagues and really want to help them. But all too often there can be frustration because these teams, they work at two different speeds. And what I mean with that is that they really have their own like workflows and backlogs. As one customer once told me, our IT team keeps telling us it will be in the next sprint. That's because they have the other priorities. So no, super interesting. Just looking at the time, Jackie, I think you've been super wonderful. And maybe before we part ways, I was wondering if you had any advice for Marketing Cloud newbies, or let's just say Salesforce newbies, since you've worked across so many clouds anyway, or even marketers in the early stage of their careers. Like, what would you tell these people if they want follow down your path?
I met someone a couple summers ago. It was a few months after the marketing champions had been announced. And this person reached out to me on LinkedIn. She said, I don't like my job. I keep hearing about Salesforce. And so I have gone, and she said, I've sent a message to every single marketing champion that got announced. So I think there were 120 of us. She said, I sent a message on LinkedIn to every single one of you. And I'm setting, if you're willing, I'd like to set up time to talk to you about your career and your growth and, how you got started in this industry. And she put in the work. She went and she met with as many people as she could. And it just so happened that at the Salesforce career fair, like a few months later, she attended. It was a virtual career fair. And she stopped in to the booth that I was working at, and I introduced her to a colleague. And she got a job out of it. And all because I said, hey, I met her. She messaged me on LinkedIn, over the summer last year, and I really liked her. She's very driven and she's working really hard and she wants this. So my advice to folks is, use the marketing champions community to your advantage. All of us that are part of it, we wrote essays and we signed up to say, hi, I want to be involved in the community and I want to help people. And we asked to be part of this group, and we get rewarded with plushies and stickers and lots of prizes. So you're not bothering us. This is what we signed up for, and we want to hear from you. We want to see how we can make this community better. So my advice is to, do what my friend did and reach out to people and show your interest and make a statement of what it is that you want in your career. And by deciding that, I think it's all the more likely to come true.
That is such a wonderful story, and I appreciate you sharing that with us and all the other advice and bits of information you've been sharing throughout this whole conversation. I really value your time. You're an inspiration to the community. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you, Anthony. I would say the same to you. It's just been an absolute pleasure that you invited me here today. And DE Select is just such a cool organization, and I'm lucky that I get to be part of this group.
Thank you for watching Heroes of Marketing Cloud. I hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date about future interviews with fellow marketing champions.